Hey guys! So September is kind of a special month for me. Not only is it the month of my wedding anniversary, it's also the month my brother and my two best girlfriends celebrate their birthdays. It's the beginning of fall in New York, which is an awesome season here. And it's also September 11th anniversary. And now that I have a YouTube channel and I have a place where I can record my thoughts, I decided I was going to do a video where I shared my story. I've never actually told it before, and I'm sorry in advance if this video ends up being really long, a little depressing, and I also hope I don't offend anybody. But yeah, here it goes. So on the morning of September 11th, 2001, I was 18 years old. I'd only just graduated from high school, and high school had been really awful for me. I had an exceptionally terrible time. So I was relieved to be a graduate, but I was also going to Hunter College, which is on 68th in Lexington, actually not very far from where I live now. And I wasn't happy about that, because it wasn't the college that I had wanted to go to. My first choice just was too expensive for my parents to handle. And I had had a wonderful, amazing childhood. I'm just one of those lucky people who can't say anything bad about my childhood. But my parents had just been divorced. They had just recently gotten divorced. So my brother and I, along with my mother and father, we were kind of still mourning, reeling. We were in shock kind of over the whole entire thing. It was sort of a difficult, strange time, you know, the end of childhood, the beginning of adulthood, learning how to balance a checkbook and work and, you know, school, and just trying to be responsible for myself for the first time ever. And I was still living at home with my mom and my younger brother. I grew up in the West Village housing in Greenwich Village on Washington and Bank Street, which was about a block away from the Hudson River. And it's an awesome neighborhood. It's home to me. Everywhere I've been in New York, and I have literally lived in all of the boroughs, in so many different places. I was a gypsy for a very long time, going from one place to another. And I have not been able to find a place that feels like home, except when I'm there. Very strange. So anyway, I was also, besides going to college, I was working part-time at the Children's Aid Society. It's a nursery school. It was on Sullivan and Bleecker Street in the Village. And on that particular day, I didn't have to be at work until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I didn't have any classes, so I was in bed. And both of my parents were at work, and my younger brother, he's 5 years younger than me, so he was still in grammar school. And school had actually just started that week. My mom called me, and I was really sort of annoyed with her because I had had all this time. I had time in the morning to sort of lounge around the apartment and not do anything. I didn't turn on the TV, and I was kind of just hanging around my bedroom trying to decide what to do because it was a beautiful day, and I was thinking about calling in sick and playing hooky and just not going to work at all that day. But yeah, my mom called me. And she basically said, turn on the news, something's going on with the Twin Towers, and yeah, you need to check out the news. And sure enough, one of the towers was on fire, and they were playing this clip about a plane having hit it. And nobody really knew in the beginning what had happened. I think a lot of people, myself included, just thought it was a terrible accident. No one had ever, or at least I hadn't ever, contemplated the fact that maybe somebody would have flown the plane into the tower on purpose. And being a curious teenager, I got dressed and I leashed my dog and I walked out of my apartment. I walked up Bank Street and I went to Hudson Street. And I think one of the things that's really funny is that I stood in front of Abington Square Playground. And actually that's the playground that I grew up going to. I have amazing memories there. And it's just kind of strange that I should be standing in front of this place while I'm watching my city kind of turn to shit. And as soon as I kind of stopped walking and I was looking up at the first tower, which was smoking, and the smell was incredible, something I won't forget. another plane came. So I actually saw the second plane hit. And at that point, everyone was craning out of their windows, the traffic stopped. It was really sort of scary to even see your hometown street sort of close down, and just nobody really knew what the heck was going on. And but when the second plane hit, I was sure that we were under attack somehow. I didn't really know what was going to happen next, but I knew that something bad was going on, that it was planned. And I should probably say, in terms of how close I was to the towers, I could probably walk to the towers from where I was living in, 25 minutes, maybe. I don't know, I'm probably maybe a mile or two away. And they were huge. I mean, incredible structures, totally impressive. And one of the things that is really strange, it happens to me less and less, but whenever I would be lost, like coming out of the subway, I would look around for the towers, because I knew when I saw them that that was downtown and the other direction was uptown. And so, yeah, it's happened a few times to me over the years that I've searched for them and they're now gone. So, the towers falling was something I will never forget, and I really felt like I was kind of standing in the middle of history as it was happening. Terrible history, but history nonetheless. And the first tower it was really scary. It fell in pieces. Boom, boom, boom. Sort of just, I can't even really explain. The sound was, it was deafening. It was frightening. It was like, I don't even know how to explain. It was almost like being, like you watch the news and you see all these terrible things happen in third world countries, and it just kind of felt like I was transported into a place like that. The second tower falling, of course, it was like a really grotesque accordion. It did this, boom, 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 boom. And that was more frightening to me. And within minutes of the second tower falling, thousands of people were coming up Hudson, coming up the West Side Highway. Some were covered in blood and grit and dust. There were sirens everywhere, obviously. And in that moment, people started to scream things like bombs, like there are bombs. And because I was outside and I wasn't near a TV or a radio and I was just in the middle of all of this mass chaos, and I was 18 and young and impressionable and alone, I couldn't get in touch with my mother or father. I had a cell phone but couldn't seem to get on the phone with anybody. I panicked, and yeah, I really did panic. Ugh, I'm getting chills thinking about it. It was pretty awful. Fear is a really intense emotion, and when I remember just kind of running uptown with the rest of the crowd and looking at different places and thinking about where I could hide. And, at one point I picked up the dog that I had with me. She's a little beagle, not a very big beagle like my dog now, but I was carrying her and she was heavy and it was hot. So I got as far as 34th Street, Penn Station. And Penn Station is really crowded anyway, just because this is kind of where the commuters come in from other places. And I mean, you could just feel the fear in the air. Like, everything seemed to stop running. Like, the trains were at a halt, the taxis were at a halt. And not knowing what to do, I just sort of sat outside of Madison Square Garden, and I just couldn't really move. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't sure where to go. And it was actually, there were police everywhere kind of shuffling people around. And a cop saw me sort of hanging around. I was sitting down again with the dog, taking a break. And I hadn't brought my money or a wallet with me, so I didn't have any money to buy, like, water or, and at the time I was smoking cigarettes like crazy. And, a cop saw me and was just like, you know what, you should go home. Like, you should get out of this crowd. And not knowing what else to do, I turned right back around and I went back downtown towards my home. And within 5 minutes of getting in the door, my mom walked in with my younger brother. And the first thing she said to me was, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And she said, "We have to go to St. Vincent's," which was the hospital in our neighborhood. It was on 14th Street. And she said, "We have to donate blood." So she changed out of her work clothes really quickly, and we walked over there very fast. And St. Vincent's was amazing. It was quartered off. There were barricades everywhere. There were ambulances being driven all over the place. I mean, and all of the hospital staff was out on the steps. Some of them were smoking, drinking coffee. You could feel the fear and the anxiety in the air. And there were thousands of people. And because nobody knew what the heck had really happened yet, like, nobody really understood what had just transpired, except that, people were stuck on these top floors. And can you just imagine the fear of, many people actually jumped to their own deaths. They decided that it would be better to die quickly than die in a fire. And because nobody knew what was going on, everyone was sort of climbing over each other to get at the news crews that were being set up all over the place. And they were shouting into the cameras things like, "So-and-so is my husband, my brother, my sister, my friend." And they were in Tower 1, Tower 2, on such and such floor, and I haven't heard from them. I don't know what to do. And there was one woman in particular that I remember. She was not much older than I am now. She had blonde hair in a ponytail, and she had a Gap t-shirt on. And she was crying into the camera about her fiance. She was a school teacher, and her fiance had been in Tower 2, I think, on one of the top floors, and she was screaming about how she couldn't get a hold of him. She was not sure where he was. I had never seen such hysterical grief before in my entire life, and I'm ashamed to say that I had to turn away. I couldn't actually look at her. Like, I'd never seen that. I don't think I've ever seen it since, honestly. And all the while, I was so frustrated that there was nothing that I could do. I mean, we stood in this crowd of thousands of people in front of the hospital, and like so many others, we really just wanted to help in some way, but we didn't know how. And my mom, after about an hour of this, my mom decided that we should leave, because she was just kind of like, your brother's really little, there's no way we're going to get near the hospital. And 10 minutes before we left, the ambulances just stopped coming. It was amazing. Like, they were coming in droves, one after another, and then all of a sudden, nothing. So we walked home, and we went into our supermarket. Obviously, we bought some supplies because my mom was unsure of what would happen. She was finally able to reach my father and let him know that we were okay. And a lot of people actually walked home that day from Midtown and other places too, because, nobody knew if the trains were running, nobody knew about the buses, the taxis. It was just really intense. So a lot of people walked home. The streets were pretty packed that day. And we drew up some signs, and we went down to the river, and we stood along the river, and we held up these encouraging posters and signs with hundreds of thousands of other people. And, we cheered on the firefighters that were coming from all states, all around, all boroughs, and we just stood there cheering them on. I was incredibly frustrated that there was not a whole lot that I could do besides this. And so I went down to Pier 40, where they had a makeshift Red Cross camp, and I worked for 48 hours straight, making sandwiches, making care packages, trying to help out with the firefighters and cops that needed to be fed. And by the end of 48 hours, I was exhausted. In the days that followed September 11th, yeah, the smoke and the smell were intense. I mean, it didn't really dissipate for a few days, like even more than a few days, I'd say a week and a half. So it was pretty commonplace to wear a mask as you were walking around downtown, just because the air was so horrible to breathe. I mean, I walked around with a sore throat all the time. To get home, I had to show ID. The army was there, so it was really surreal seeing the army with a bunch of machine guns standing on corners where you would go grocery shopping or put your kid in a taxi, like, you know, the corner that you take a taxi every morning, or the playground, or even near the bank. And I had to go through barricade after barricade after barricade showing ID to get home, and that was really pretty scary. Paperwork from the offices, they flew all over the city, so, like, I mean, for miles. Like, you'd find, I don't know, all sorts of office documents that were blown everywhere, and you'd see them on the street, things that were just carried along on the wind. Yeah. There were masses being held at St. Patrick's Cathedral, and it was really important to both my mother and myself that we went to them. And there were a few, I think for like 2 days maybe, or a day. There were like a mass was held every couple of hours, and it really felt like the entire city showed up. So they had all sorts of, I guess, you know, the politicians and like family members of, you know, the police and the firefighters. Everybody filled the cathedral. So they put speakers all around Fifth Avenue, and they blocked off the street, and they held mass. And my mother and my brother stayed home because he was little. We stood there amongst hundreds of thousands of other New Yorkers listening to the Cardinal over speakers outside of St. Pat's, and we cried, like, with all of our other New Yorkers, all of our neighbors and our friends, and that was one of the most touching moments of my life. You know. The other thing that happened were the missing posters. Missing posters sprang up on every wall of every building of every city block, in the millions. I mean, like, you couldn't walk anywhere without seeing a missing poster. It was really horrifying. And, yeah, it was just, like, it was horrifying. And in some places, there are still memorials that have been left up. You cannot, even to this day, walk past a precinct or a firehouse that doesn't have a memorial up to somebody who was lost on September 11th. Everywhere, all over the city. A couple days after that, a girlfriend of mine came to visit me, and we were curious. We wanted to see what Ground Zero looked like, and we walked whatever it was, 1.5 miles, 2 miles down to it, and of course the army was all around it, but the gates in this one section were open, and we literally just walked in. And we walked in, and there were other New Yorkers too that would kind of come and look and see, because we were all sort of, what happened, you know? It was like a hole in the ground. I mean, literally a hole in the ground. And there were workers. I mean, we were in a really bad place. We shouldn't have gone down there. We did get in trouble for being down there, but, you know, this was our city. Our beautiful skyline had just been taken from us. You know, it was, not to mention all the stories that we were now hearing on the news about the people in the airplane who had tried to fight off the terrorists. We also were hearing reports about the Pentagon and what happened there, but definitely the towers took the brunt of this attack, for sure. Finally, I had to go back to work. I also had to go back to school. And on that day, we had to walk, I believe, to 23rd Street, or maybe it was to Union Square. We had to go to Union Square because most of the trains were not working. There was only like a few lines that were working at all, going. So, of course, everybody needed to get back to work. And one of the more amazing parts of this story was that on the platform, the platform was so crowded that if you just pushed someone like a little, someone on the other side would literally fall off into the tracks. And nobody complained. I didn't hear anybody cursing, anybody swearing, anybody getting angry or upset about this. It was just silence. And I thought it was pretty amazing to see that and to live through that too, to kind of just see New Yorkers banding together and just being respectful of the event and the people that died in this horrible event, and just not complaining about having to suffer a little on the morning commute. Because normally rush hour in New York is pretty intense, and ugly words are said all the time, but not after September 11th. September 11th was kind of a catalyst for a bunch of things that went wrong in my life. I was horribly depressed. I'm sure that I probably had some sort of post-traumatic stress, but definitely not on the same scale as some of my friends who lived closer or who had people that died. But there's not a single New Yorker my age who doesn't have a story who wasn't affected in some way. And for 10 years, I have literally sabotaged myself, making the wrong decisions all the time. I dropped out of college, and I never went back. I went from one lovely boyfriend to one really destructive boyfriend. I moved around constantly. I had horrible roommates. I lived check to check. I just chose all the wrong things for myself over and over and over again. It just really confused me, having experienced this. I don't know, it was something about September 11th, it just really set me back, I guess, is the only way I can kind of explain. And I have, however, grown up in the last 10 years. I've gotten married, I've had a baby. I haven't forgotten that day or the events that happened in my life afterwards, and I never will, never. But I feel happier, I feel more at ease with my life, and New York has bounced back. I mean, it goes through its declines, obviously, with the economy, it goes up and down, up and down. And I've had my moments of walking through Times Square and feeling afraid and thinking to myself, well, is this the day that, Times Square is going to get blown up while I'm here with my family? I've seen some scary things happen. But, I guess if I wanted to leave you guys with any kind of advice or any sort of final thought, I guess, it would be, don't live your life in fear. And don't teach your children to hate. Like, the men that committed that act, they were evil. But they came from communities where there were probably people just like you and me trying to live every day and take care of their children and go to school and have their jobs. And we need to remember that. Don't live your life with a box around your heart, with a fence around your heart. And don't live in ignorance. Open your heart. Open your mind. One of my best friends is actually Muslim raised. And we've had many a conversation about this particular subject. And, the action of a few should not define a whole group of people. There's evil in every ethnic group in the world. I mean, even here in the States. White people here in the States. What about all those, never mind. Never mind. I don't want to go down that road. I don't want this video to be too controversial, I guess. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm shaking. I don't know. I don't really know why I decided to talk about this today. It really is not easy for me. Yeah. That's pretty much it. I just hope that, people don't forget that this happened, but it's also a good, as an 18-year-old watching this and experiencing this, I never once thought about why this happened to us, but maybe that's something that we should have thought about. Maybe that's something we should continue to think about. Like, why would our actions as a country make someone else hate us so much that they would do something like this to us? And I think that if you think about that long enough, you might feel surprised about how you end up feeling about the whole thing. And that's my point, is, racism exists, and it's a really sad thing, A lot of people died that day. People of all backgrounds. And we shouldn't, we shouldn't soil their memory by filling ourselves with hate. We shouldn't. And I don't. And I wouldn't teach that to my daughter, and I'd feel very sad for someone who felt that way. But now that it's the 10th anniversary of September 11th coming up in the next couple of days, I'm probably going to go down there if I can. And I'm going to pay my respects. And it's the end of a decade that literally changed my life. And I'm happy that it's over. I'm happy that we got through the first 10 years. And I wish the families all the best. I hope that they're okay. I hope that they're at peace. And I love New York. It's part of my soul. I'll never leave. Never. Never, never, never. No matter how many times they blow us up, no matter how many times they threaten to blow us up, I will never leave New York. Never. It is the greatest city in the world. It is. And I am so lucky and blessed to live here. And it's home. And it's a wonderful place. And no matter what anyone says, New Yorkers are super friendly. Yeah. So that's it, guys. I hope you all have a great weekend. And I will see you in my next video. And hopefully it'll be a little bit more lighthearted than this one was. Alright. Bye.